Go for it,
So
Annie. Take over.
I work with people that have a calling, and that tends to be a spiritual calling, although I do have some clients that are atheists, but they're all people that feel like they're being called, prompted, pulled, guided, whatever language we may use, to do something greater. But very often what we find is that there's some challenges in that awareness. So once you're aware that there's a calling, the purpose, you're being guided to do something that helps other humans on this planet, a lot of the work that I come across is needing to clarify and activate that. So someone might say, I feel like I'm being pulled or drawn to do this. And it creates this cognitive dissonance or this internal conflict friction. And so one of the services that I provide is helping people clarify what it is they're being called to do. And then once we identify what that is, we activate that at a metaphysical level. So that is saying that we are going to accept the energy, we're going to own the energy, and then now we're going to activate it to be able to be the beacon of light, or the beacon of compassion if they want to work in hospice or something like that. And so the solution to that issue is to work for about 90 minutes one-on-one using multiple modalities in what I call calling in your calling session. And then very often there's blockages and confusion, because what our culture doesn't talk about is that emotions can manifest into physical ailments. And so when we are in that place where our mind, body, spirit are not in full integration, something such as anger can manifest into a chronic dis-ease. So with the issue number 2 of blockages and confusion, what we want to look at is what is there blocking you from being able to fulfill your calling? And if it's energy, can we release it? Can we release a trauma that's trapped in, let's say hypothetically, on the concept of Sampropti, that the energy is trapped in the knees, creating arthritis, and that arthritis is symbolic of not being able to move forward in life. So even though we have this calling, now we have this issue of, can we take it, clear that issue, honor it, release it so we can move forward in a spiritual empowerment path. With issue number 3, discontent with your current life situation, when we become aware, when we come out of that spiral of chaos and we say, this is what I want to do, I want to accomplish this outcome. And for some people it might be, I want to leave working in hospitality and go into a field of medical or legal or what professional field. There's that transition period. And so the discontent with the current life situation is saying that now we have an awareness and this pull to do it, getting on that path and having the clarity to do that. What I do is I work in I do an awakening session of, let's awaken whatever it is that the journey, the legacy, whatever language we may use depending on our religion and spiritual beliefs, whatever that is, let's get on that track and let's move fast on that track. Issue number 4, very often people experience a spiritual crisis at some point in their timeline before they come to me, is that they believed something so rigidly, sort of that was absolute truth, and then something occurred, such as a metaphysical ability like clairvoyance, claircognizance, they become a psychic medium, when that goes against their religious beliefs. And so there's that spiritual crisis that says, how can these two things be true? How can I honor God, say in a Catholic lane, and have this gift that I had been taught was a sign of witchcraft? And so when we work with spiritual crisis, it's saying, well, God, why would God give you a gift if you weren't intended to use it? And so when we do that, we go through the discovery session of what beautiful gift can you impart on humanity by having this. And hypothetically, let's say it's like psychic medium. Is it to work with people in a hospice capacity to help people cross over with compassion and um, and so that those individuals don't feel alone at the time that they pass. And so spiritual crisis is something that we go through, and it has to, and it redefines what truth is to us. And that's something I would work with a client of, let's deal with the emotional side of what this means. With issue number 5, experiencing metaphysical abilities or spiritual gifts, like I just mentioned, very often people, they may have had it as children, had some gift, and sometimes that gift is simply like warm hands. So in a time of comfort, to have someone with very warm, compassionate hands, that is the individual's gift. And that compassion can be like one of the women I work with, her calling is to work with people in the category of homelessness, mental illness, recovery, addiction recovery. And her ability is to see people at their own eye level. So if it's homeless, it's getting down on the sidewalk, looking at someone in their eyes and saying, I see you. You are a human, and the ability to humanize humans is part of her calling. And so everyone has some ability, spiritual gift. Some people have multiple gifts. And we want to go through this, the calling in the calling process, to identify what that means and how we can impact the world in a greater way.
Wow. Okay. And I'll open it for comments or questions, but I just wanted to say, to begin, is what came to mind when I saw how we've stacked our services here, and it just happened by accident, really. It's almost like we've got Maslow's triangle.
Yep.
Because,
Yep. The path to enlightenment at the top.
right. It's like when you're feeling stress, when you have chronic pain, it's hard to go to the higher levels because you're dealing with an issue that is bothering you constantly, and it's almost like, on the other hand, it's very important that we see ourselves as not just helping someone to become physically healthy,
Yeah.
but that there's a purpose, and that as people that we work with become healthier and more conscious of their health, and more at peace, and happier, and their relationships are going better, that's a time when they're going to be asking these types of questions. Okay, why? What's it all for? What is my legacy? What do I want to create on this earth? And that's where Annie is the natural next step. And sometimes it can work the other way around, where if we're working with someone in some area physically, and they're just having trouble, there's kind of a blockage, they won't lose weight, or the chronic pain won't go away. It's amazing how, when somebody is lit up with a calling, it can totally revolutionize their physical situation. And so I think this really comes hand in hand, and that's part of how Annie could be a very integral part of what we're doing. I think in terms of my running, the only reason, and I've known this for ever and ever, the only reason that I have continued running is it's not a workout. It is more of a spiritual experience. If it were not a spiritual experience, I would not be able to maintain my running. I would not be able to maintain my health regimen, because that's what really fires me. It's the deep spiritual experience that I'm having when I'm working out. And so it's all interconnected, and our society has divided things up so much. But that's enough for me to say here at this point. I'm just looking for connections, though. I'm looking to see how we all integrate as as a wellness center. Um,
We have doctors for the mind. We have doctors for the body. In our culture, we don't embrace the doctors for the soul.
mhm.
And that's really the role that I play in this health piece is the is the spirit, the soul healing and the discovery.
Well, that's something that I think each of us might want to explore with you, Annie, just to get a feel for what that means in our own lives. And that would help us to understand ourselves better and understand what you do. Um,
Yeah, and I think Annie touched on something important. And when we're looking at the five pillars of health,
yes.
uh, it became very quickly became very obvious that it was a lot leaning towards the nutrition, the physical, all the obvious stuff. But when it came down to the spiritual, in our society, there's not a lot of options. As opposed, you go somewhere like India, and it's the inverse,
Mm-hmm.
right? A very spiritual culture, right? And so you can see the contrast and the differences between, uh, well, when you put all the pillars out, you see that it has to be balanced, right? Not one is more important than the other, and they all have to be addressed. So, yeah, I agree with Annie.
You could take one thing like depression. Okay, if you don't know what your purpose is and you don't know what your future holds and you do not have hope, you may be depressed. If you're depressed, you're more likely to eat a lot or to starve yourself or to experience chronic pain.
Yeah.
And so that can all turn around when a person comes in touch with their calling, and it affects each of our, the work of each of us. I've had lower back problems when I'm depressed.
Yep.
And it's not just because of my running. It's not because of my shoes. There's not a physical cure for it. It's because I'm depressed. And when that depression is overcome, when I get more in touch with my purpose, curiously, my joint pains begin to dissipate. So
It's
it's
all
interesting.
linked.
Yeah. Okay. So, any other comments, questions for Annie? Okay, good to see you, Holly. Welcome. So we're just going through each of our services. Annie has shared hers that has to do with clarifying and activating your calling, overcoming blockages, um, and working through the discontent with your life situation that comes when you realize there's a calling and you're not in it fully. Experiencing a spiritual crisis when that calling comes into conflict with your current life and your relationships and your traditions, and then finally experiencing metaphysical abilities or spiritual gifts as you begin to deepen your calling.